The anxiety paradox. Why fighting your fear makes it stronger, and what actually works. You know that feeling when your heart starts racing over something that hasn't even happened yet? Maybe it's Sunday night and you're already dreading Monday morning, or you catch yourself creating elaborate disaster scenarios in your head about things that statistically will never occur. Here's what nobody tells you about anxiety. The very thing most people do to fight it is exactly what makes it worse. And I'm not talking about some pop psychology theory here. There's an ancient framework that's been helping people navigate this mental maze for over 2,000 years, and modern neuroscience is finally catching up to why it works. What if I told you that the solution isn't to eliminate anxious thoughts, but to completely change your relationship with them? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share might flip everything you thought you knew about managing anxiety. Let me start with something that might sound counterintuitive. Anxiety isn't your enemy. In fact, trying to treat it like an enemy is precisely what gives it power over you. Think about what happens when you have an anxious thought. Your immediate reaction is probably to push it away, to tell yourself you shouldn't be feeling this way, to mentally wrestle with the worry until you're exhausted. This is what I call the anxiety amplification loop, and it's a trap that millions of people fall into every single day. Here's how this loop works. An anxious thought appears. Let's say you're worried about an upcoming presentation. That initial flutter of nervousness is actually completely natural. It's your brain's threat detection system doing its job. But then something interesting happens. Instead of observing that nervous feeling, you start fighting it. You think, I shouldn't be anxious about this. Other people handle presentations just fine. What's wrong with me? Now you're not just anxious about the presentation, you're anxious about being anxious. You've created a second layer of suffering on top of the original concern. And it doesn't stop there, because now you might start worrying about whether this anxiety means something deeper. Maybe I'm not cut out for this job. Maybe I'll always be like this. 3 layers deep, and what started as a simple nervous flutter has become a full-blown anxiety spiral. The fascinating thing is that ancient Buddhist philosophy identified this exact pattern centuries ago, but they approached it from a completely different angle. Instead of trying to eliminate anxiety, they recognized something profound. You are not your thoughts. Read that again. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are events that happen in your consciousness, but they are not you. This distinction is absolutely critical, and it's where most modern approaches to anxiety missed mark. Let me give you a metaphor that might make this click. Imagine your mind is like a vast sky. The sky itself, that infinite blue expanse, that's you. Your consciousness, your awareness, your essential self. Now, thoughts are like clouds passing through that sky. Some clouds are white and fluffy, some are dark and stormy. Some move quickly, others linger. But here's the crucial part. No matter how many clouds pass through, no matter how dark or turbulent they never change the fundamental nature of the sky. The sky remains the sky. Clouds come and clouds go. Always. When you're caught in anxiety, you've made a critical error. You've identified yourself as the cloud instead of the sky. You've said, I am anxiety, instead of recognizing I am experiencing anxious thoughts. This might sound like a semantic difference, but it's actually a complete paradigm shift in how you relate to your internal experience. When you think you are the anxiety, you have no choice but to fight it, because fighting it feels like self-preservation. But when you recognize that you're the sky observing the cloud, suddenly you have space, you have perspective, you have choice. So how do you actually make this shift? This is where the practice of mental mindfulness becomes transformative, and I'm going to break down a specific technique that you can start using immediately. The Buddhists call it watching the mind, but I'm going to give you a practical, modern application of this ancient wisdom. The next time you notice anxiety rising, and this is important, don't try to stop it. Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Instead, get curious about it. Ask yourself a simple question. What exactly am I thinking right now? Not in a worried way, but in a genuinely curious way, like you're a scientist observing an interesting phenomenon. Let's say you're anxious about your finances. Instead of spiraling into worst-case scenarios or beating yourself up for being worried, pause and actually examine the thought. What is it specifically? I'm worried I won't have enough money for next month's rent. Okay, that's a concrete thought. Where did it come from? I had an unexpected car repair this week. Now you're gathering data. Here's where it gets interesting. As you observe the thought, rather than becoming the thought, you'll notice something remarkable happens. A gap opens up, a space between you, the observer, and the thought being observed. In that gap, that tiny moment of separation, you reclaim your power. Because once you can see the thought as an object, something separate from yourself, you can examine it rationally. Is this thought based on reality or projection? Is it helpful or harmful? Is it even true? Most anxiety thoughts, when you actually examine them with curiosity rather than fear, fall into a specific category. They're catastrophic projections about the future based on incomplete information. Your brain is essentially writing a horror movie script about things that haven't happened and statistically probably won't. But when you're fused with the thought, when you think you are the anxiety, you can't see this. You're too close. You're inside the movie instead of watching it from the audience. Let me give you another layer to this that's absolutely crucial. Every anxious thought is rooted in what Buddhist philosophy calls a delusional emotion. Now, before you think I'm calling you delusional, hear me out. What this means is that anxiety always contains a distortion of reality. It's taking something real, maybe a legitimate concern, and then distorting it through the lens of fear until it becomes disproportionate to the actual situation. Think about social anxiety as an example. The real element might be, I'm going to a party where I don't know many people. The anxiety distortion becomes, everyone will judge me. I'll say something stupid. They'll all think I'm awkward. I'll be humiliated. Notice how the anxiety took a neutral fact and spun an entire narrative of disaster around it? When you can observe this process happening, when you can catch yourself in the act of creating that narrative, you can intervene. You can say, okay, my mind is creating a scary story right now, but what are the actual facts? Here's something that might frustrate you to hear, but it's important. This practice isn't easy, especially at first. When I explain these concepts, it sounds simple and logical. But when you're in the grip of a panic attack or drowning in worry, implementing this feels nearly impossible. And that's okay. That's actually part of the process. You're not going to master this overnight, and expecting yourself to is just another form of the perfectionism that probably feeds your anxiety in the first place. Think of it like building a muscle. The first time you try to observe your anxious thoughts instead of becoming them, it might last for 3 seconds before you get pulled back into the spiral. That's not failure. That's 3 seconds of practice. The next time, maybe it's 5 seconds, then 10. Then you catch yourself mid-spiral and can pull back out. Each repetition, each practice session, even the ones that feel unsuccessful, is strengthening your capacity to create that gap between observer and observed. There's another dimension to this that we need to talk about, because it's often the hidden fuel that keeps anxiety burning. Most people who struggle with anxiety have an unconscious belief that their worry serves a purpose. They think that by worrying, they're somehow protecting themselves or preparing for the worst. They think that if they stop worrying, something bad will happen because they weren't vigilant enough. This is anxiety's most insidious lie. Worry doesn't protect you. Planning protects you. Action protects you. Preparation protects you. But worry is just your mind spinning in circles, creating stress hormones and exhausting you mentally while accomplishing nothing. When you observe your thoughts mindfully, you can start to see this distinction. You can ask, is this thought leading to productive action, or is it just rumination? If it's the latter, you can acknowledge it and let it go. And that phrase, let it go, often feels maddeningly vague. How do you actually let a thought go? Here's the technique. You don't push it away. Pushing it away is resistance, and what you resist persists. Instead, you acknowledge the thought, thank your brain for trying to protect you, and then gently redirect your attention to the present moment. What are you actually experiencing right now, in this exact second? Not in the imagined future, not in the regretted past, but right now. This is where the power of the present moment becomes your refuge. Anxiety cannot survive in the present moment. That's not an exaggeration. Anxiety is, by definition, about the future. It's about what might happen, what could go wrong, what you'll have to face. But when you bring your full attention to right now, to this breath, to the sensation of your feet on the ground, to the actual reality of this present second, there's usually nothing wrong. You're usually safe. You're usually okay. The practice then becomes training yourself to return to this moment over and over again. Your mind will wander to the future. That's what minds do. They project, they plan, they worry. And every time you notice it's happened, you have an opportunity to practice. Not to scold yourself for wandering, but to gently bring yourself back. There I go again, writing disaster scripts. Come back to now. What's actually happening right now? Now, I want to address something important about self-compassion in this process, because this is where many people sabotage their own progress. There's a pervasive cultural message that you should be able to handle everything perfectly, that anxiety is a weakness, that you should just be able to get over it. This messaging is not only unhelpful, it's actively harmful. It adds shame to anxiety, and shame is like gasoline on a fire. Buddhist philosophy recognizes something that modern psychology is finally embracing. Suffering is universal. Every single person, regardless of their wealth, status, success, or appearance, experiences psychological suffering. Some people just hide it better than others. When you understand this, when you really internalize that anxiety is part of the human condition and not a personal failing, something shifts. You can approach your anxious thoughts with compassion instead of judgment. What does this look like practically? It means when you notice yourself spiraling, instead of thinking, "I'm so stupid for worrying about this," or "I should be over this by now," you think, "This is hard. This is what anxiety feels like, and it's uncomfortable." And that's okay. You treat yourself the way you'd treat a good friend who came to you with the same struggle, with kindness, with understanding, with patience. This compassionate approach actually makes the practice of observation more effective. When you're not adding judgment and self-criticism to the mix, you can see your thoughts more clearly. You're not defending yourself from yourself. You're just watching, with curiosity and kindness, the patterns your mind creates. Let me bring this all together with a framework you can actually use. Think of it as the 3-step anxiety response system. Step 1. Acknowledge. When anxiety arises, acknowledge it. I notice I'm feeling anxious right now. Simple recognition without judgment. Step 2. Observe. Get curious about the thought. What exactly am I thinking? What triggered this? Create that gap between observer and observed. Step 3. Ground. Bring yourself back to the present moment. What's actually happening right now? What can I control in this moment? This isn't about eliminating anxiety. It's about changing your relationship with it. It's about recognizing that you are not your anxious thoughts. You are the awareness in which those thoughts appear. And from that place of awareness, you have choice. You have power. You have peace. The clouds will keep coming. Some days the sky will be filled with them, but you'll know with increasing certainty that you are the sky, vast, unchanging, whole. And every cloud, no matter how dark, eventually passes.